The Hong Kong Institute of Chartered Secretaries recently held its 11th biennial Corporate Governance Conference. In the conference's second session, the speakers were asked to give their views on the relationship between corporate organizations and shareholders, including shareholder engagement and rights, and the balance between shareholder and stakeholder interests. The first speaker to respond to this question is Professor Frederick Ma Si-hang, chairman of MTR Corporation Limited.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I'm honored to have the opportunity to share with you some of my thoughts on the subject of new relationship with shareholders. I'm sure all of you agree that shareholder engagement is necessary and important. Why is it so? First and foremost, shareholders are one of the most important stakeholders of a company because they do provide the equity funding to support a company's start-up and continue operations. How to engage your shareholders? That is where understanding and communicating with your shareholders come into play. I'm a big believer of communications. When I took on the role as the chairman of MTR Corporation, communication is one of the 3 C's that I impress upon our staff. If some of you are interested to know the other 2 C's, I'm more than happy to share with you on a different occasion. But the need for directors and executives to maintain dialogue with their shareholders is a very real one. Not only that there's such a need, it should be one of the top priorities of a company. Shareholders these days are very different compared to, say, 10 years ago. They have a lot more expectations and demands, and they are not shy in expressing their wishes. In the past, shareholders tend to focus on financial returns and took on a passive investor role. They were contained for so long a company performed well financially and there are no big troubles. Nowadays, shareholders are much more active. In addition to financial returns, they are also after many other qualities in a company: transparency, good governance, and social responsibility are high up in their agenda. As the BlackRock chairman and CEO Larry Fink mentioned in his open letter to the CEOs of public companies early this year, a company, either public or private, quote, needs to have a sense of purposes before it can achieve its full potential, unquote. The shareholders these days want a company which knows its own purpose and has a strategy for long-term sustainable growth, not only for the company itself, but also for the society as a whole. All these have contributed to the rise of shareholders' activism seen in the past decade. Of course, our institutional investor friends also play an important role here. According to a recently published report, the number of shareholder activism campaigns in Asia has increased by 10-fold since 2011. Shareholders are much more daring and proactive in pursuing what they want from the boards and management of companies. Although shareholder activism in Hong Kong is still relatively mild, I have no doubt that it will continue to gain momentum and prominence in Hong Kong. So it is time for companies to get ready for their strategy and plans to better engage with the shareholders before it's too late. There are statutory and regulatory requirements under different Hong Kong legislations, as well as under the Hong Kong listing rules, designed to govern disclosure and to drive transparency, which all of you as company secretaries know very well, better than I do, and there's no need for me to go into any of this. I would, however, like to share with you that To attain a meaningful and effective shareholder engagement, the communication strategy of a company should be one that can achieve a better understanding between the company and its shareholders. It has to be a two-way communication and on ongoing basis. The ultimate objective is to build a trusting and long-term relationship with aligned goals and visions. To embark on the journey of a shareholder engagement, a company must, one, honestly evaluate the extent to which it has or has not met the demand and expectation of shareholders. Two, take actions to address the gaps, especially issues in the areas of transparency, disclosure, environmental, social, and governance matter, which are among the top priorities of many investors and regulators. In parallel to a company's effort to manage the different demands and expectations of its shareholders, it is equally important to make known such efforts and plans to its shareholders as well as other stakeholders. To ensure productive engagement, companies first need to understand their shareholders' base so that corresponding engagement measures can be developed to engage retail and institutional investors respectively. Currently, the usual communication channel for retail investors are AGM, corporate websites and publications, as well as shareholders' hotline. For institutional investors, the usual additional channels include roadshows, analyst briefing, investors' conference, and private meeting. There are also other means available for engaging shareholders like business visits, interactive mobile apps, use of advisory specialists, as well as reader-friendly annual report. For example, use of infographics and plain language, and to consider adopting an integrated report. Now, it is advertising time. MTR. For those of you who are from overseas, try to take MTR. It's one of the best in the world, in spite of what you read in the media. At MTR, stakeholder engagement, which includes our shareholders, is something high up on our agenda. The board, as well as management, are well aware of the fact that our shareholders, which include, as I said, the government, which owns 75% of our shares, as well as the public, expect the corporation, on top of delivering business results, to also play the role of a good corporate citizens and give back to our society. That is why they always ask for a reduction in fare. The board is fully committed to maintaining transparency and operating our businesses in a responsible manner, as this is a must for achieving long-term sustainability. To this end, we constantly publicize key facts about the corporation and actively in participating in a wide range of engagement and corporate responsibilities activities. A core element of our year-round engagement efforts is that we listened and, insofar practicable, responded to the calls upon us, including fare reduction. From our train operations, property business, to building new railway lines, MTR makes conscious effort to protect our environment through reducing resource consumption. We set savings target for energy and water consumption for our business operations and proactively adopt green building standards and new technologies to drive our targets. We were one of the first companies that issued green bonds, in case you were not aware. Hong Kong is the home of MTR. We treasure our city and take special care to protect our environment whenever we build new railway lines. Preservation of trees is a priority for us, and I think many of you have come across the stone wall trees on Forbes Street in Kennedy Town. When the West Island Line was built, our project team shifted the location of Kennedy Town Station and changed railway alignment in order to preserve the banyan tree there, because we understand these trees have a special place in the hearts of the people and the community there. I'm glad that we have been able to preserve such a unique landmark, which brings historical, ecological, and cultural values to the neighborhood and the wider community in Hong Kong. Conservation of biodiversity is also another important focus of the corporation. MTR has been working with a group of environmental professionals on managing the Lok Ma Chau wetland since 2002. A recent example is the 2.4 hectares of mitigation stream habitat in the form of a widened open channel constructed next to the Sekong stapling sidings as part of the Express Rail Link project. Apart from contributing to environmental protection and preservation, MTR also cares for our society and has devised different initiatives targeted at a wide range of beneficiaries covering elderly, youth, and the underprivileged groups. For example, the year-round fare concessions. Young people are our future leaders. We are committed to support their development. Some of you may have heard about our program called Trained for Life's Journeys and STEM Challenge. They were tailored for secondary school students. These programs aim at empowering young people with skills, motivation, and perspectives to build and create a bright and sustainable future for themselves and their communities. We have also organized a number of youth forums for our young people to exchange views with our management on matters relating to MTR, because we do listen to our passengers, our stakeholders. In terms of community support, our staff actively participate in those community activities. Through our More Time Reaching Community scheme, our staff organized close to 300 volunteering projects in 2017. MTR has a clear long-term strategy which was disclosed in our annual report. The board regularly reviews the strategy to monitor its progress. This also helps us to position the corporation when engaging our shareholders. The corporation has been using different means to engage its shareholders, both retail and institutional investors. Designated shareholders hotlines and email boxes are made available to handle shareholders' inquiries. We also ensure our corporate website is up to date in providing useful and transparent information to our shareholders and the public. Each year, the corporation hosts investors' conference, forums, meetings, and analyst briefings for our institutional investors. In 2017, we held over 370 meetings with institutional investors and research analysts in Hong Kong and in overseas. We fully appreciated our retail investor value the opportunity to meet the board and management at our AGM. And we make sure that there are reasonable opportunities for our shareholders to ask questions and raise comments relating to the corporation. Shareholder service counter is also made available at AGM venue to provide additional channels for our shareholders to ask questions and share their views with the corporation. Ladies and gentlemen, shareholders' engagement is a journey. It takes time, and there will be challenges on the way, especially when shareholder activism is anticipated to gain more prominence in the years to come. Here are a few considerations to bear in mind when working to engage your shareholders, which is basically based on our experience. One, the shareholder base for some company is huge and geographically dispersed, involving a wide range of different interests, and shareholders' views are often not homogeneous and in some cases could even be conflicting. In the case of MTR, we have over 200,000 retail investors. Just imagine 200,000 investors. Two, meaningful engagement takes time and patience to cultivate, and so be prepared to invest extra directors and management time. And three, engagement comes at a cost. It involves manpower, resources, and even investments in equipment and technology, so be sure to make provisions in your budgets, please. To recap, shareholders nowadays are more sophisticated and active. Shareholders' demands are escalating, and they are increasingly inclined to support activism. In addition, technology allows shareholders to access corporate information and exchange views easily and without boundary. All this point to the need for a well-planned and continuous shareholders' engagement for all listed companies. In this internet era, electronic communication are inevitably part of our daily lives. Mobile phones and computers are used by almost everyone. We have seen a consistent increase in AGM attendance rate in Hong Kong in recent years. The pressure for companies, at least those with a large shareholders base like MTR, to consider using electronic-enabled communications like webcast and online meetings in the AGM environment is mounting up. There are ongoing debates around virtual and hybrid shareholders meetings, which both have pros and cons. In Hong Kong, there will be legal and regulatory issues to be addressed before we can move away from physical AGM. Whatever channels you are using to engage your shareholders, I want to emphasize again that the key to success is to make it a two-way conversation as opposed to a one-way dissemination of information by the company. This ends my sharing. Thank you very much.
The second speaker, Mr. Franklin Chen, is Regional Sales Director of Diligent Corporation. He talks about cybersecurity issues in the boardroom as well as with shareholders.
So I was given this topic about a month ago. It reads here, board, shareholder, the cyber dimension. So obviously, we know in today's world we deal with technology on a daily basis, but from a corporate governance perspective, what does the cyber dimension have to do with the board and the shareholder? So I thought a little bit. We're talking about the dynamics of the board and how corporate governance works these days. It's no longer about just the financials. So when we're talking about cybersecurity issues, we really have to look back at, what exactly is the responsibility of the board? So it's always useful to keep in mind that the board does have a duty owed to the corporation and more specifically to the shareholders, that they are responsible for overseeing the risks. It doesn't matter where you are in the world, whether it's US, in the UK, Australia, Asia here. It's pretty much a well-accepted model that the corporations are managed under the boards. Those who manage the board must answer to the true owner of the company, which in itself are the shareholders. The shareholders elects the board to represent their interests. The board, effectively, they look at corporate governance, minimizing risks, and ultimately, the board is responsible for making sure that the corporation is on the right track. But what does it have to do with cybersecurity? So, as you have heard in the news, I would say probably now on a weekly basis that somewhere around the world, data are being hacked. Some company in one form or another is always being hacked. So in the cybersecurity world, there's really two ways of looking at things. The first thing is, well, I've already been hacked, so now I've woken up and I need to do something about it. But what concerns me the most is those companies who doesn't know that they've been hacked. And that's what concerns me. Because a data breach normally is followed by a suit of lawsuits. There's customer class action lawsuits, there's shareholders derivative actions, all that can happen after a data breach. Aside from that, in the US, various government agencies have investigated companies for data breach, and then consequently there's enforcements, there's penalties, etc. like that. But one thing I want to point out is the latest trend in the industry. So how many of you all know Wendy's? It's the kind of like the US version of McDonald's, etc. like that. So Wendy's earlier this year, what happened was in a derivative suit, Wendy's actually settled a derivative suit for about $950,000 US. The amount is not that big, but the significance is that it is the first time that anyone is successful for a derivative action suit in the US, and that's probably going to lead to more issues for Wendy's. I've kind of highlighted Yahoo as the big one. So back in, I believe it's 2014, so Yahoo went through this big data breach, the Verizon purchase and such like that. What happened here is for Yahoo, they made a settlement of $80 million US dollars in what we call a data breach related security action. The significance of that is, in terms of the dollar amount, this is nowhere close to the top 100 settlements in the US. But what is significant about this is the first settlement for any company in the US that resulted from a data breach. So what that means is, whether it's the authorities, the courts, especially the shareholders, they are now more knowledgeable about what they are looking at, about the rights that they have in terms of protecting their investments that are resulting from cybersecurity breach. For Hong Kong, it's also apparent that more and more we're aware of data breaches here in Hong Kong. Right now, there's no mandate in terms of reporting data breach to the authorities. But however, the Office of the Privacy Commission have said that the law is aging. We need to look at it. And earlier in April this year, there was a broadband provider, I won't say the name, their inactive database was hacked. So you've got credit card information, personal information, addresses, all being leaked. So it's really time for Hong Kong to actually look at how we, as an organization, as an individual, as a board, we should be managing and looking at our data. One of the things that I heard a lot of our speakers talk about is it's no longer about the financials. We're talking about the board looking at risk management. For me, looking at risk management, one thing that is very important is the leaderships and the steps taken by the board. But before we can do any leadership, it's kind of awkward for us to talk about a topic that we're not really experts of. So I think awareness is a necessity. In late 2017, what we conducted was an APAC survey of board communications and cybersecurity practice. This same survey was first initiated by Diligent and New York Stock Exchange in early 2017. So what we did was we went out and we interviewed listed companies on the New York Stock Exchange, as well as its board members, officers, and conducted a survey on what are the best practices on cybersecurity. And we've replicated that late 2017 in APAC. We conducted 118 online interviews with board members. It was done in 2017. What we found was that 80% of director actually uses personal emails to communicate with fellow directors and management. So what implication does that actually have? As you understand, when you talk about board meetings or discussion board members are having, they're not just talking about wine, they're probably talking about strategies, what directions should our company go through, mergers and acquisitions. There's actually a lot of sensitive materials that they talk on a daily basis. What we found more interesting was that half of them is actually using free emails, such as Gmails or Yahoo Mails. I won't talk about the extent, but if you're talking about damages that can be done by using free emails, it can cost someone an election. And that's essentially what happened a few years ago, because their email account, so they were using a Gmail account, it got hacked, and it basically cost them an election. So in the corporate world, you're talking about share prices, etc. The other thing I want to talk about is where these sensitive information are stored. So with that same group of people, we asked them the question, so what devices do you use for your board communication? Basically 41% saying that they're using their personal laptop for their business discussions. This is a challenge for organizations and corporate secretariats, because what you want to do from a good governance perspective is you want to have that ability to control where your information sits. So let's say, for example, when there is a litigation or e-discovery process, you know exactly where to go to find the information that you need to look for. So instead of asking the director, well, can I have your laptop or can I get your mobile phone? That can become a very, very messy and also a complicated situation. This is quite interesting. Cybersecurity is a complicated topic. You need the necessary expertise. So we asked the same group of people, who sanctions your communication? Only 7% is saying that our IT or information security team or data security team is actually sanctioning how we are saving and storing our materials, how we're actually communicating with each other. 21% have left it to company secretaries. And then some have said it's audit and risk committees. What's surprising here is 65% have actually left it to the decision of a board chair or a lead director. Now, these are extremely busy people, and you are dealing with something that requires a specific expertise. So between all the things that they have to juggle, the shareholders' engagement that Professor Ma talked about, how much time actually does a lead director or board chair actually can and sit down and look at, well, what protection do we have as an organization to make sure that our cybersecurity risk, and we have a proper plan to mitigate risks for that. Now, I'm not just talking about board communication in general, but when I talk about cybersecurity risk, it's actually the cybersecurity risk of that entire corporation. That includes your customer data, your financial records, all that. So it's that whole regime of program that you need to have placed around your organization to ensure that there's minimal bearings when something does happen. So what gaps do directors believe needs to be addressed? There needs to be greater protection from ransomware, because right now we're all using our own devices, and do we know how to actually protect ourselves? I received a phishing email from someone who's pretending to be Apple. And then the next day, I got another similar email from FedEx. So we're probably getting those emails on a daily basis, but are we alert enough? Are we aware enough to actually help ourselves or the company to prevent from a data breach? There is a huge gap in terms of communication and training on cybersecurity risk. It really should be addressed. Where you store your information is also very important. So besides the point that I've made earlier in regards to looking at e-discovery process or just finding information, the way that we dispose our information and data is also very important. So during our survey, 52% said they've actually downloaded board meeting materials onto their personal laptop or a mobile device. Apple announced the new iPhone, and we're most likely, I would say not all, but probably a good percentage of us is going to be looking at those phones. Now, we're going to have data that is stored on our old phone. Is it disposed of properly? Because when we actually resell that used old iPhone, are we erasing all the data? Information that we store on our phone, do you know exactly where it's stored? Yes, I can say that it's right here on my phone, but I'm pretty sure it's backed up to a Google Cloud or an iCloud. Now, do you know exactly from an organization perspective where these data are actually being stored? Are they somewhere being stored in their infrastructure in India, or is it in Australia? You know, that's something that we also have to look at, because it opens up another can of worm in terms of the different jurisdictions of the different countries in terms of data privacy legislation. So obviously, paper copies are sometimes not destroyed, materials are not secured. These are just some of the things that we need to address. This is actually quite surprising to me. So we know that cybersecurity is an issue. We know it's a very, very hot topic. But when we actually did our survey, half of the respondents says that, well, we're not aware of any audits being made around the way that we communicate and how we store our materials at the very top level of the organization. No offense to any CEO out there, but I have met CEOs that says, well, I need this done this way, and just get it done. What's more surprising is, well, since there's no audit, we thought, okay, if there's no audit, that's fine, but at least they're made aware of the risks. 76% actually says no. They've never received any trainings. We're not updated on the latest trend, what's out there, what are the risks for the companies, which is really, really scary. And what we hope to do here is just to help everyone understand the dynamics of cybersecurity better, and the next time that we do this survey, that this number will significantly drop. So what are the suggested steps? Number one, because the board deals with sensitive information on a daily basis, it's important to actually have a proper policies around it. I kind of talked about the same issue last year, this time, in a conference in Indonesia. I think it's very important when we actually look at that policy to get your CIO, to get your information security team involved and actually help the board understand what exactly are the threats that is posed in terms of how you're protecting your company's data. Once the understanding is there, implement a secure governance software, put in the necessary infrastructure, and then just make sure that we are following our best practice, because we're the front line. It doesn't matter what position that you're in. We receive emails every day. We engage with our technology every day. And I think prevention starts best from us than actually relying on a IT team or a cybersecurity team. I think I'm just good in time, so I will hand this time back to Professor Lowe.